There you are. Hey, this is Ty Bruner, and welcome to The People We Meet. This is a show about ordinary people that have done and lived through extraordinary things. Thanks for being here, and let's get on with it. All right, today I'm here with TJ Gaia on today's episode of The People We Meet. And TJ has selected Celsius as our beverage of the day. I'd never had one before. It's delicious. Thank you, TJ, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We have quite a bit of ground to cover. It turns out this is going to be our second episode on a series of episodes dealing with PTSD. And TJ came highly recommended, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting into this with you. All the good stories start at the very beginning. What's the beginning for you? Where were you born?
I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada in November of 1983 and lived there for a short time until my parents divorced. And my mom and I moved up to Moscow, Idaho, actually, when I was, I think 6 months old or between 6 months and a year old. Yeah.
So pretty early on.
Yep. Yeah.
And then Dad stayed down in Vegas?
Yeah, my father stayed in Vegas. As far as I knew, I've actually met him twice. The first time was in 2008, and I had an Army buddy of mine run his name and figure out where to run his license. Actually, my mom did as a dispatcher when I was a teenager, and found out that he lived in Spokane and was 90 miles away most of my entire life, and I never had any contact with him at all.
No kidding.
Yeah.
They didn't come looking for you?
No, that was a conversation that we had in 2008, actually.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
How did that go?
The conversation was really weird. I wanted to meet him because I wanted to know, is there family history of medical stuff? And my mom kind of told me the story about what happened, but she didn't speak disparagingly about him or trash him. So I wanted to hear, from his side. And it was pretty funny. A buddy of mine, an Army buddy of mine, went with me, and he was a former Marine, and we rode our bikes there, and we met in Brown's Edition. I would never forget. We met in Brown's Edition at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And at that time I was drinking heavy, and I was so nervous to meet him. I was like shaking, and I had probably 3 beers in 20 minutes in the morning just to get myself in the right mindset. And my father pulled up. Jason, my buddy, was in his Marine Corps shirt. And my father pulled up. He's like, "Sorry, I was late. I figured you'd either stand me up or kick my ass. And I see you brought backup." Haha. He was making a joke. And Jason's sitting there with his arms crossed. And he's like, "Dude, I'm here for you, because if he gets his hands on you, you're effed." And that was like, all of the joke fell out of his face. And we had a conversation about kind of what happened. And I heard a lot of excuses. I'm not a big excuse fan. I don't like making them or taking them. And he said that he couldn't find me, which my grandparents lived in the same house forever, same phone number. I actually met his parents when I was, I think, 10 or 11. I spent a weekend with them. So there's just a lot of excuses. And man, I tried finding you 3 weeks ago, and here we are. So,
So it wasn't that difficult.
No, it really wasn't. And going to find him, I went to the last known address, and it was this kid. I mean, I was in 2008, I was on about to go to my second deployment. And this kid, answer story, is probably 1920 or something like that, in this just trashy place on this lower South Hill.
Ooh. And
I told him who I was, and I showed up in uniform because I was on orders at the time, and told him that I was looking for my father. "Oh, I don't know where he's at." And then 3 days later, I got a text message to my government cell phone, which was a flip phone at the time. And I couldn't respond to the text message, but it said, "Hey, Trevor, this is Tim, your father. Heard you're looking for me. Give me a call." And then I had to go back to the house because I couldn't respond to the number. So I had to get his phone number, and the kid wrote it on the back of an Avista bill that I'm sure he didn't pay. And, and then that kind of started it. So yeah, I've been less nervous in firefights than that first meeting.
Yeah. Sometimes firefights are less emotional.
Yeah, totally.
So how did that meeting end? What?
It ended pretty abruptly, me thinking that I didn't need to see him again. And there was some contact after that. He reached out to me through Facebook, actually, and wanted to invite me to his wedding, which I thought was pretty odd. And then he was telling me how he was selected to this neighborhood committee, and like I should be proud of him or give him an attaboy. And I responded immaturely with a list of my accomplishments. And I'm like, dude, you're proud of yourself for this. You don't know me. I'm like President's Dean's List in college and Bronze Star Combat Action Badge, Armed Forces Person of the Year. Spoken. Like, I just went through all of these list of things boastfully to try to kind of put it in his face, which was, at the time I reacted like a hurt child because I was, even though I was a man, I was still stuck in that. And it took a couple of years to get over that, and my faith and some healing that got me to a place where I met him again just this last summer, actually.
It's interesting that even though you're grown up, like somebody who either very positively or very negatively influenced you, years later you can go right back to how you felt then.
Yeah.
Good or bad. And it's interesting to hear you say that. So it sounds like it gave you a little bit of closure, though.
A little bit more. I was so angry at the time, and I grew up just with my mom and feeling like we struggled growing up. It was tough. I moved around an awful lot, and we didn't have much. And there was times my mom would say she wasn't hungry because there wasn't enough for both of us. Like, it was really difficult, and I couldn't imagine leaving someone, especially now as a father.
Sure.
There is nothing that could stand between me and my boys, like, ever. So it really, I was really angry, and growing up without that positive, well, I don't know if it would have been a positive influence anyway, but kind of a healthy male influence. I like, man, if I ever meet him, I'm going to beat the crap out of him. And,
it was like a boy named Sue.
Yeah, totally. But then by the time that I met him, I had gone through, active duty time and was about to go to my second deployment. So I had done and experienced things and grown up and was capable. And at that point, I didn't want to physically harm him anymore. Like, kind of that physical anger was gone, but it's like, man, just help me understand this, because I don't get it. I don't get it.
And not making excuses for him by any stretch, but it sounds like, there's the silver lining in the cloud is that you went on to learn the lessons and what not to do.
Oh, totally.
To be a better father.
Yeah. You can either follow down the same path, or you can choose that you don't want anybody else to experience that. You don't want your children to experience that. And by the grace of God, that's how I got there.
And I think it takes a stronger person to say, I'm not going to do this. We're going on a different path, than to say, oh, well, I do this because this is what I had growing up.
Yeah.
So backing up, so you lived in Moscow with your mom.
Yep.
Sound like you're poor. And she was working a lot. Just sounds like she was working a lot. Just trying to keep the lights on.
Yeah, multiple jobs. I was a latchkey kid, pretty much. She did retail stuff. Was a bar manager, like a bartender. I remember hiding under the pool table at bars when people would come in that weren't regulars, just so she didn't get in trouble. And we moved around an awful lot just because of the situation. I kind of raised in trailer parks and
moved around Moscow.
In Moscow, in Moscow, in that general area. Yeah, for most of my life. Then I moved to Potlatch, Idaho, just outside of Moscow. Towards the end of 8th grade, I think I had 3 or 4 weeks left of 8th grade before we moved out there, and that's kind of where the most stable. Because I moved in Moscow, I went to 3 of the 4 different elementary schools, and one of them twice. So it was, in 6 years, you're hitting 4 different schools. At least it was.
I get that. I was as a military kid, and I was like the new kid in school. Every single year.
It's tough. It's tough. I think some people are kind of more built for that, able to make friends quickly. But it takes a while to fit in and figure out, who your friends are. And then when you have to just redo that over and over again, some people really get good at it and develop the skills, and other people never do. And I don't know that my feeling is that I never really did until I got into high school and kind of understood myself a little bit better and got in with some great friends that I'm still friends with today.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So moved around a lot, lots of different elementary school, lots of different schools. And then what were those years of stability that you mentioned? What?
Probably freshman year through junior year. And technically I got out school in 11th grade. Most of my friends were the class ahead of me. And I didn't really like the thought of being there another year without all my buddies around. So I'd worked to get through correspondence courses so I could graduate early and failed a class that prevented me from doing that. And I had I got accepted into an automotive tech school.
Nice.
And because I failed the correspondence. It was a family consumer science, and it was interior design class that I failed. So don't let me decorate your house. That's when my wife does all this stuff. And I ended up having to get a GED so that I could meet the requirement and still go down to school on the date that I had set. And that was hard for me because I felt like I failed. Like I couldn't even graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuck with me for a lot of years, an awful lot of years, actually.
So did you, I can see that. So, and just how did you feel growing up with just your mom, not your dad? Because like, I know how I felt like because my mom wasn't around and I thought, well, she didn't like me well enough to stick around. How did you feel? Like, did that, did you have those feelings? Did they impact the way you felt about other things like what you just said?
You know what? I don't know. I think, especially growing up, my mom and I were super tight. It was us against the world pretty much. So, and she was pulling double duty. And my mom, I probably never have told her enough. And I don't think I could adequately express how much I appreciate the love and the effort and how hard she worked just to make sure that we had a roof and had food. And I didn't need for anything. Of course, wanted for things, but I never needed anything, and I didn't know different. So it was just us, and I was just grateful. I saw a woman that worked her butt off to provide and not make excuses, and was never on any government assistance, that's there for a reason, and I don't shame anyone for that. But that's just not how she was built. Maybe there's a little bit of pride in that I really respected.
And she's still with us, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So maybe she'll hear the show.
Yeah, I'm sure she will. Yeah.
So did you have any like male figurehead in your life?
There was probably the only stable ones for my grandfather, and I had him until I was 13. He was a deacon in the Catholic Church in Kingman, Arizona, and started or ran a St. Vincent de Paul down there, a thrift store that helped out people. And that was like, I watched him serve so well and love people so well. And this old man in his 70s, late 70s, walking with 2 canes. And I've seen him I remember this one time that a guy came in for, needed a gas voucher or something, because Kingman, Arizona, at the time, most people only moved there because their cars broke down. Like there wasn't any industry or anything that brought them there. It was on Route 66 and 90 miles away from Vegas. So, but there was this big giant, I remember him as like a biker guy, just huge. And he was getting nasty with my grandfather. And my grandfather never raised his voice, but talked to this man, and you just watch him shrink because of the kind of the commanded respect that my grandfather had in that way. So it was my grandfather, and then probably my uncle Robin, who we moved up with my aunt, my mom's sister Carol, and Robin in Moscow. That's where we moved. So he was kind of the most stable male influence in my life. He built this table, actually.
We did a very nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
So did you have any? You said he was a deacon.
Yeah.
Did you have religious influence growing up in Moscow?
Not in Moscow. I mean, for most of the time, we would do like the check the box Catholic things, go to Easter and Christmas Eve Mass, but that was about it. And that wasn't also very regular. And kind of the older I got, the more I questioned and didn't really understand or agree with faith. I had my own kind of issues with what I saw. And I was not an atheist, but probably more agnostic. Like I don't really believe in it. That's good for you, but it's not for me, kind of thing.
Sure.
And I said as much to my father-in-law when I asked for my wife's hand, because he's a man of faith, and said, it's a man's job to guide and lead his family in faith. And I was like, cool story, bro. Like I will support her in whatever she wants to do, but that's not me. And then
So were you approved of or not approved of?
We got married. Yeah. I was approved of.
Good.
I was approved of. And he is a praying man. He's probably, I call him dad, not regularly because I'm kind of stuck on the word. But I want to. There's times I remember before I did it the first time, I was like, we were shooting darts in his garage, and he's a car guy. So we kind of connect like that. And I told him, I was like, I want so bad to be able to call you dad. And if he's just the most gracious and awesome man. And it's like, well, you can. And it's still awkward even now. But he's like, I'll tell my wife, like, oh, dad called. And then she'll get mad because he didn't call her. He called me. And then we argue about that a little bit.
So you had your pretty stable group of friends through high school. You said.
Yeah.
And then what'd you do after high school? Did you join the Army right after that?
No, I went down to Phoenix to UTI, Universal Technical Institute, to be a mechanic. And I got there in 2001. I was 17 when I moved down there, 2 days before 9/11. And that was a culture shock. I went from a kind of a country mouse in Potlatch, Idaho, with a population of 1,500 to Phoenix proper. And I lived right off of 19th and Northern, which at the time was State Farm's 7th most dangerous intersection in the United States.
Big change.
Yeah, totally. I lived on a golf course, and the first night I was there alone, I think I was outside, and I heard like this pop, pop, pop. Yeah, that's weird. That's not a car backfiring, and it's not hunting season in the season. And I went inside, and then not long after that, I could hear police radios going on, and there was a shooting, and they were knocking on the doors of all of the bottom level apartments, thinking that this guy could have run in there. Like, oh, this is much different than what I'm used to, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I was down there for a year, almost a year exactly, going to school, and I worked and went to school for a little while at a Kmart. It was one of my favorite jobs, actually. Helped to stand up a Kmart that was newly built, and then was the automotive department lead. And I had just turned 18, I think, and I'm like supervising people my mom's age. It was really weird.
Yeah.
And then I ended up double phasing. So I was going to school. It was broken down into like morning classes and night classes, and you kind of picked either or. And I was able to do both of them and not have to work. I got a lot of help from my grandmother and my mom from that. So I got done with that in a year and got offered a job. I went through a Ford factory technician program and got offered a job at University Ford in Seattle. And I was like, I don't want to be in a big city. I want to go home. And
building out a resume, though, getting pretty well rounded.
Yeah, trying to. And it was so funny because after I joined the Army, I got stationed at Fort Lewis, like 45 minutes from where that dealership was. It was pretty funny.
So how long? So was 9/11 kind of a catalyst?
It was right after, about a week after we graduated. One of my best friends, Joe, joined the Army, and he went into 82nd Airborne. And then it was in 2002, he was on block leave and was getting deployed to Afghanistan. And that really, I had always appreciated, I was a boy, like just a regular boy, military and police. That's kind of was always in the back of my mind. And I watched him leave and knew that he was going off to fight. And there was probably some jealousy in there, not bad jealousy, but man, I would like to do that. And
a little envy.
Definitely.
A little bit, yeah.
Definitely envy. Like, man, I would love to be able to go and fight alongside my buddy.
Yeah.
And then it was February of 23. I ended up going to see a recruiter just to talk to the recruiter. And 6 days later, 2003.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then went and talked to the recruiter, and I told my mom I was going to go talk to the recruiter. She's like, don't sign anything. I said, okay. And then 6 days later, I was swearing in at MEPS. And then,
so did she not want you to sign anything because she wanted to be particular about what you were going to do?
No,
or
she didn't want me to do it.
Okay.
No, I was an only child. So, and it was just, like I said, it was just the two of us for so long. So she didn't want me to be in a position where I would do that. And that was, it was pretty funny. This story about before my first deployment that I'll tell you. She went to my favorite restaurant. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. I've been blown up a bunch of times. So sometimes my thoughts don't get completely linear. But we went to, my favorite place to eat was Tomato Street at Bake Mostaccioli in Clarkston, Washington was where it was at. And we went there before my first deployment, and I'm eating my Bake Mostaccioli, and she's like, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. I'm like, okay. She said, I want you to donate sperm just in case I don't come back. I'm like, oh, thanks. So now I have to find a new favorite meal. It took a while, but I'm back there. I still love Tomato Street, but yeah, it was funny. That's just how my mom's awesome like that.
So she wasn't wild about you joining. So you signed,
Yep.
sworn in.
Yep. I chose, as I was looking around at jobs, I scored pretty well on the ASVAB and had kind of my pick of the litter. And I knew that I wanted a combat arms job. Like this is kind of, in my mind, joining the military, that's kind of like, I want to be the bullet guy. So I looked at the combat arms jobs in the Army, and at the time I didn't want to be walking a lot. So I picked armor crewman. I figured I could ride on a tank. It's 70 tons. It's pretty safe, and it's got a lot of guns and stuff on it. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I went to basic training in May of 2003 at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah, one station unit training. So I was there for 16 weeks. I did basic and advanced training all together. And at the time, I was listed as a namesake. So the only male child. So when I graduated OSIT, they were going to send me to Fort Irwin, California with 11th ACR to be part of a training rotation, which is a non-deployable unit. And I was like, man, that's not what I didn't sign up for combat arms to be stuck stateside. That wasn't it. Armored Cav Regiment.
Okay.
ACR. Yeah. So I had to talk to the commander of my basic training unit and get a memo signed, and then was able to get on orders and got orders to a regular line unit.
So if you're a namesake,
the only Gaia, only male Gaia.
So that means if you're a namesake, they're more selective on where they send you in case.
Yeah, and it's like, think of like Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't want all of that. The name would have died with me.
Right.
They thought so.
Gosh, I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So after basic training, I got stationed with 1st Stryker Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, which was a light infantry division that had been upgraded to the new Stryker, 8-wheeled Stryker combat vehicle. And enjoyed the time at Fort Lewis. Some people like fit in the military. You know, some people don't like it. They can't take the authority. I loved it. I had such an awesome time in basic training. It was great.
You're one of those.
Yeah, it was the time of my life. Shining boots, and man, I had, it was so easy to me, and it was structure, and it was really structure and discipline that I needed, that I didn't have a lot of, and I didn't realize how much I needed it. And I think every boy too really needs the structure, the discipline, but also needs kind of that testing.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you made of? You need those kind of experiences, and the military was it for me.
It's funny. It's funny to hear you say that, because like after boot camp and going off to A school and stuff, I'd hear guys say, I miss boot camp. I always thought they were full of shit.
I loved it. I liked the regular Army better, but I didn't struggle like other people did. I got to be a platoon guide and get the little kind of BS leadership positions in basic, and it was awesome.
Well,
I had a great time.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So hey, please continue.
Let's see. So I joined when I got to my unit, we came up on orders we were going to deploy. So we did our workup to deploy. I missed the NTC rotation, the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, which is 11th ACR, where I would have been going. They play Op 4. So they're like the fake enemy that you war game against, and your unit gets given the blessing. Yes, you're ready to deploy, or no, you need more training before you go. But we went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and went through the same thing there with a lot of mount training, military operations in urban environments. And we ended up deploying October of 2004.
So this is your first deployment?
Yep, first deployment.
After the Tomato Street and for sperm donation.
Yeah, totally. And initially we flew into Tal Afar, Iraq, which is kind of northwest Iraq, close to the Syrian border. And I had some pictures and stuff that I'll show you after my time there. The second or third day, the whole place was like moon dust. It was like inches and inches of this super fine silty powder. And I think it was the second day we were there, there was this enormous sandstorm, dust storm that was, it was incredible. Like I'd never experienced anything like that. And everybody got in their hooches and blocked the doors with towels and stuff. And some guys were on top of the connexes that it rolled in so quick, they got stuck up there. It was kind of a rude awakening.
Do you know what the nature of that super fine dust is? Like what?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. but it was nasty. It got everywhere. It was, you could hardly breathe. Even walking to the chow hall, you would walk and every step was these big plumes that came off and you'd just be completely dusted out. It was unreal.
It's not good for weapons and equipment.
No, it totally isn't. And we fell down on the unit that we replaced. We fell down on their equipment, so their vehicles, and we had to get them all cleaned and ready. And we were going to operate out of Talifar. And it was a short time, a week or two after we got there. They're like, nope, you guys are getting moved. You're going to be going to Fab Merez in Mosul, Iraq, on the western side of Iraq, close to LSA or the airport Diamondback there.
So what was the sentiment of the unit going in? And what was the morale? Like ready to hit the ground? We're ready to kick some ass?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
We had, I think a lot of people would probably say it, but our unit was quite unique in that how close we were, everybody. Our battalion commander, Eric Carilla, is actually now 4-star general. Eric Carilla, I think he's the CENTCOM commander right now. He's this big guy, he was at West Point. I think he played football with my 2nd battalion commander. I'm a product of good leadership in the military too. So not only did I like it, but I've had just incredible leaders at all levels above me to help kind of train me up. But Colonel Carilla at the time was like, I always called him like Buzz Lightyear. He's this big, like square-jawed, huge guy. And he led absolutely from the front. He's the kind of guy that you'd be standing at the ocean or the gates of hell and he'd be like, all right, boys, let's go. And we would follow him
without
into
question.
It. Yep, absolutely. He'd come around and like, when we were at Fab Merez, we'd be sitting around the fire after missions or when we have a little bit of downtime, and he'd kind of sneak up and just start shooting the breeze with us. And before we'd go on missions, he'd stuff it. All right, boys, let's kick it in the nuts. Let's get our jihad on. That was like his thing. So we'd go get our jihad on. And it was, it was crazy. I remember rolling into Fab Merez, and as soon as we got through the gate when we came from Talifar, we hadn't even gotten our rooms or anything. We just rolled in. We park in the motor pool, drop ramp, and guys are starting to take their gear off, and then mortars start walking in on us.
Really?
Oh, we're not at Fort Polk anymore. This is the real deal.
The welcome committee.
Yeah, totally. And that kind of started the deployment. It was like the Wild West in Mosul at that time. It was crazy. Yeah, it was wild.
So first action.
Our platoons were kind of broken up, or our companies were broken up, and we had a couple of different mission sets. We did full spectrum operations. So from raids and cordon and searches, like setting up and going house to house and searching for people, high value target. We did security for Iraqi police stations. We had training rotations for the Iraqi National Guard that was being stood back up. And then we had force protection stuff where we would man guard towers on the base. And it started off pretty hot. Firefights were regular. The first KIA that our battalion suffered was on my vehicle, Thomas Dorflinger. And that was kind of one of the defining moments of my life. There was an argument with my lieutenant about where I was going to be, and I should have been where Tommy was. And he was arguing, wanted me somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And we had gotten back on the vehicles after a cordon and search and heard shots. We didn't know it at the time. We're like, what the hell was that? Looking around. And then Tommy got shot and took the bullet. And for so long, I dealt with survivor's guilt, thinking, why him and not me? And part of that was because growing up, I didn't understand the value of my own life. So I didn't understand why God would take him and not me. Why would he not put me in that place, which I should have been?
Right.
And after a lot of years and thinking about it, that was a way that guilt, that survivor's guilt that I felt, was a way for me to feel like I had some control over a situation that I didn't have any control over. And I've always told the story as he took my bullet, when kind of the reality and the understanding that I have now was that was never intended to be mine anyway. And I should probably change the way that I tell the story, but I've told it, for over 20 years now in the same way. So that was a really difficult time. And we went right back after the Kazivac and got him back to the cache. There was nothing. I mean, he was dead immediately. There was no suffering. And then we went as soon as we dropped them off, we went right back into the fight and we're launching tow missiles into buildings. So yeah, welcome to Iraq.
Yeah.
We went from that. There was a couple of really big explosions. IEDs were huge at that point. Luckily, they didn't have EFPs yet, really. Explosively formed projectiles, which are like platter charges with brass and stuff. But it was a lot of bulk military grade munitions, and I have some stuff I can show you downstairs too from my time. But we would get little tire poppers, grenades, or mortars, or little 155 rounds buried in concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Or the biggest one was almost 1,000 pounds that hit my vehicle.
So how long after? So what we're talking about now, these explosives? How long after Tommy's death?
It was all mixed in. Like for the first 6 months,
Okay.
6 or 8 months were really, really tough. It took us a while to kind of gain the trust of the populace there.
Gotcha. So just backing up real quick. So after you lost Tommy,
mm-hmm.
it sounds you went right back into it.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like there was like no real opportunity to process it or anything like that, and you just kind of carried that with you.
Mm-hmm.
So now here we are. How much down the road?
Well, we're going out the next day. I mean, I remember being so angry,
mm-hmm.
and that was kind of a turning point where I didn't see. It was harder for me to see people as people, right? Like when you dehumanize someone, it's easier to treat them poorly, and some of that is self-preservation, that you put yourself in that state of mind so that you can do the job that you're asked for. But we were already so tight as a unit. It's like you want the revenge, and it's looking back on it with the benefit of time and perspective and faith. There's a lot of things that I felt and that I did in ways that I viewed things that I'm definitely not proud of, and I dealt with some shame in that for a long time. But it's war is hell, right? Like it is when you're faced with losing people and living in that constant state of fear. And when I go into this house, is there going to be somebody around the corner or what? Like you don't know, so you're constantly on 10, and it's hard to spin down. And we'd get mortared on the base too. And we were getting mortared regularly, a couple times a week, sometimes a couple times in the same day. So you're always
hyper vigilant.
Yeah, totally. And at the beginning, it was everybody. You'd hear them come in, and then everybody would be running to the bunkers. And then after a couple of weeks, a month, it's like nobody's running to the bunkers anymore. If you can hear them, you're good. Right? It's when you don't hear it that you're screwed anyway. So like, what's the point?
Matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So Tommy was November 11th of 2004, and then kind of the next hugest thing was the Chow Hall bombing, Fob Merez. We had this big kind of sprung tent. It was a big giant insulated tent with this kind of some fabric vinyl or whatever. And I remember when we went to the Chow Hall the first time, they had my favorite thing was a pasta bar. I already said baked mostaccioli was my favorite, but they had this pasta bar where you'd pick your pasta. It was like Subway almost, but for pasta. It was awesome.
We seem to be establishing a diet pattern.
Yeah, totally. She could probably lay off the carbs, but I remember it struck me because the sneeze guard that was over it, there was a KBR, a contract worker back making the food. And I looked at the sneeze guard, and the sneeze guard had like shrapnel holes in it. And then you'd look up and you could see holes in the tent because it was pretty large. And it was also closest to what we called Route Tampa, which was the road that kind of the main highway in Iraq that went from south all the way up through the north. But I think it was December 21st was the Chow Hall bombing. And I was not in the DFAC when it happened, but my roommate, Malone, was. He was getting iced tea and had people kind of around him. He was at the iced tea maker, and a suicide bomber that had snuck in detonated a suicide vest inside the Chow Hall.
Jeez.
It killed, I think, 22 people total. And we heard it down at the motor pool, and then everybody scrambled to try to go up there. And when Moses came back, I remember he went to the cache because he took shrapnel through the arm. He's a big bodybuilding guy from Alabama. He took shrapnel through the arm, and he was trying to explain what happened. It's like everybody blew up. I caught on fire. I started dropping the ground and rolling, and I was rolling on dead people. And he made it outside to a bunker and was like still smoking on fire. We were picking pieces of flesh off of his weapon and his uniform. But he went to the cache and they're like, it's merely a flesh wound. I mean, it went through his bicep, but he's like, we have bigger fish to fry right now. So he didn't wait in line. He just came back to the hooches. It was, that was pretty wild. Pretty wild experience. We ate a lot of MREs and sea rats after that for a while until they built the new chow hall. But yeah, it was an incredible loss.
So did you know a lot of the guys that were in there?
We only had a couple from our battalion there. We shared the base with, we were like the largest operational force. And then there was some guys from Ranger Battalion. I can't remember which battalion were there at the time. And then some support. And then the base was owned by a kind of non-operational. They kind of managed the base and force protection. And we had our own gate in our own kind of gym area that we operated out of, just us, so that we could get out. And we controlled the western part of Mosul. So
what was the projected length of this deployment?
12 months.
12 months. And how far are you into it now in this chow hall bombing place?
2 months.
Okay. So
yeah.
Still pretty early on.
Yeah, we got there October. Yeah, October, I'm pretty sure, is when we got there. And yeah, and that was just kind of how our life was. It was every day was something. We didn't get a ton of downtime. And the timeline is like putting the timeline into place. I don't know, I bounce around a lot, and that was 20 years ago. It's tough to kind of recall some of those things. But we spent a lot of time prepping the country for free elections and stuff. So we'd have crazy rotations during the elections, 48, 72 hours of being up, mostly escorting engineer units that were trying to harden these voting places. Spent a lot of time at 4 West Police Station, which was northwest Mosul, on one of the two main bridges that connected east and west. The Tigris splits Mosul. So we spent a lot of time up at 4 West Police Station. Cobb Tampa was one that got hit by, so there's videos online of that. It was a dump truck V-bed.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So that was during our time there. I think Alpha Company was there when that went down.
So you've seen, just in that first deployment, just early on, you experienced several fairly traumatic events.
Yeah.
What was the downtime like with your guys? Because, our vets come home very frequently just, hampered with PTSD.
Yeah.
How did you guys, was there any opportunity to deal with it, process it? How did you guys talk amongst yourselves? Because we've got, you got black humor and, and we talk about decompression and all of that. What did you guys do?
A lot of shit talk.
Yeah.
Like that's just what we did. We didn't really talk about the feelings. I think to just being part of the culture, combat arms culture, most everybody is type A. I'm a man whose thing is bigger than the other guys. That's just kind of how we operated. So we made a lot of dark jokes and, we didn't talk about it a lot. And oftentimes there wasn't time to talk about it, right? I think a lot of it felt like a distraction, and you want to go into the next mission wired tight so that you aren't a liability and you don't put yourself in a position that somebody else could get hurt.
Absolutely. And it seemed, when you're in that, you're in that constant hypervigilant state, it seems like an awfully big ask to step down and start talking about your feelings. So, I can see that. The opportunity doesn't present itself in a lot of the time.
Yeah. We had a chaplain. We had a chaplain for our battalion, Chaplain Wilson, like the most incredible guy. And after Tommy, especially because we were the first, like my platoon, my vehicle was the first ones to have a loss in the battalion. And he was such an awesome guy. I didn't give him probably the right kind of attention as he was trying to, like, not understanding how he was trying to love on us. I think part of that was my own like church herder feelings about that. And then especially after Tommy in November, I was dealing with this guilt and anger at God. And I probably would have told you at the time that I didn't really believe in God, but then how can you be angry at something you don't believe in too? That doesn't make any sense. But I always remember Chaplain Wilson coming up with this kind face, soothing voice, and just as rough and gruff as we were, he never didn't get bashful. He didn't bat an eye. He was just there, often more times than not, there when we needed him to, even just his presence. And I understand it now as a ministry of presence is what they would call that you don't have to be saying anything. You can just be there, and there's comfort in that.
So I had a pretty clear view of your faith ideals. It sounds like maybe they started to shift a little bit with the influence of the chaplain. And then it seems like a lot of people have, they find faith, or their views of faith change in the face of trauma and combat. Is that kind of how it was for you, or is it?
No, I didn't come to faith until later, until 2018 is when things started changing. So even after my second deployment, and battling my own demons for a long time, that's when God started knocking loud. And yeah, it was crazy. I'm sure
So for then, you're just kind of angry at the God that you weren't even sure existed anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Angry. Didn't understand that. I couldn't understand how could he allow my buddies to die when we went there to help people. That's what we thought we were doing, to liberate people. And I saw it too. I got really angry at kind of the news feed and the media coverage of it, because what it showed is all of the fighting, which absolutely happened. We were killing bad guys. What it didn't show was how much good we did for the populace there. And we replaced a unit, the leadership, my leadership, Colonel Carilla, and those guys, and even at the brigade level, we went with a completely different mission. We were there to find bad guys and kill or capture. Like, that's what we were doing. The unit before us, I don't think had the same, that they would often, receive contact, they'd get shot at, and then they'd break contact. They would shoot on their way out instead of going after them. We did a lot of presence patrols. That was one of our things. We had to do 2 presence patrols a day for at least 3 hours. We would go out. And I remember thinking at the time, like, you just want us to drive around and get blown up or shot at. Like, that's what we're doing. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's the point. Go and find the bad guys so that we can get rid of the bad guys. Yeah, that was just completely different. It didn't make a lot of sense to me as a 19-year-old. I was like, what are we doing? Especially after
you do what you're told.
But then you see the change in the populace, and the people that wouldn't talk to you, now they're starting to come and give you information because they know they think they can trust you, and you can. And we're putting money into the economy and going to the markets and buying things and going to some of these outlying villages. Western Mosul was more kind of industrial. The east side is really where kind of the nicer neighborhoods in the more city center was. And there was a lot of garages and shops and stuff. And then kind of the further away from you get the city, the more poor people are in mud huts with mud and like metal oil cans were how a lot of their houses were made and stuff. So we would buy meat and beans and rice and stuff, and we would go deliver it to it. And the care packages we'd get from home with stuffed animals and backpacks, and we would give those to kids. And really, we would engage with people. This Hearts and Minds campaign is what was really kicking off at that point. So we did a lot of that.
So did you find that as they, your relationship with them improved as a whole, but were they still at arm's length, or did you start forming more personal relationships with the people that you saw on a more regular basis? Did you see like your regulars? And
yeah, totally.
Anybody?
Yeah. Nobody in particular that we had. Like, we would go to the houses, but a lot of the kids, we would really kind of had a heart for the kids, because I can't imagine what it would be like to be a child growing up in that environment and occupying force.
Yeah.
Coming in, and it's kind of the devil you know versus the devil you don't, I would think. But we didn't have like real regular people. We had people that we would visit a lot, but not like super close relationship.
Gotcha.
In that way, I guess. I think I'm understanding the question, but
no, you did. I that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. One of the other huge times, the big V-bed that I got hit by, luckily, we operated with 4-man crews on the vehicle. I was on an ATGM, anti-tank guided missile striker, so with tow missiles, had a hammerhead. And one of our crew guys, Ray, was actually on leave, so there was just 3 of us. That meant the vehicle commander, the gunner, and a driver, and I was driving. And there was only 3 of us, and we had a guy in our battalion get shot by a sniper. And then as we went to try to find him, the whole battalion kind of converged on this area, and we're trying to find the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we got past the cloverleaf, and we were driving around kind of in concentric circles, growing our circle every time that we went around. And we went past this taxi on the side of the road that had its wheels off on the passenger side and the trunk was up. And the first time I went by it, it was off to the right-hand side of the road, and there was a median. It was, I think, 2 lanes going each direction with a median in the middle. And you didn't want to cross the median because that's often the easiest place to bury an IED because it was in soft ground. Mm-hmm. So I remember going by it the first time and like clenching my butt cheeks so hard because I'm just waiting for it to explode. And we drove by the first time and nothing happened. And then, we make our pass, go around, we come by it again. And I didn't get as far away from it the second time. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be the time. And I'm clenching as we go by it and nothing happens again. Mm-hmm. And then the third time is probably a little bit closer and there wasn't even any clench. I'm like, oh, this is just a broken down taxi. And then boom.
And then it detonated. Until it wasn't.
Yep. That got hit. I got knocked out for a little bit and like woke up to my gunner shouting my name, are you okay? And I wasn't out for that long, I don't think, but we were still coasting. And on the Striker, we had slat armor, the big cages on the side. I don't know if you've seen that. That was supposed to help defeat RPGs where they would detonate before it hits the armor so that it would happen. It would lose its energy before it hit the armor. We lost all 4 hubs on one side. They were all 4 tires were flat. I think all 8 tires ended up being flat, but all the hubs on one side. We had a fender of a car. We had a fender of a car stuck in our slat armor, like a tin can in a chain link fence.
Yeah.
It split the hull of the vehicle, put holes through the 12.7 mil armor. It was
a hell of
pretty crazy.
Blast.
Yeah.
It
was crazy.
So you got knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
No, everybody else was good. I think part of it was because I was in the driver's hole with the hatch closed. Mm-hmm. So I just remember the overpressure. It was like diving into the water, like as deep as you've ever dived at that pressure. Mm-hmm. But when you dive in the water, the pressure happens gradually, where this was all at once. Boom. And it kind of like, it just took the air out of me too. It was pretty wild. We ended up making it to the Mosul Hotel before we got record out of there and then towed back to the base. But that was a fun experience.
So a big day out on the town.
Yeah, and thank God that, by the grace of God that we didn't have somebody up there, because if Ray would have been there, it would have been Ray or I sticking out of that air guard hatch, and who knows what could have taken a chunk of that fender or any number of stuff. Who knows how it could have turned out, but I'm just so grateful that it happened as it did.
So as your deployments pressing along, do you get to that point where you start counting down the days, or what's the thought process, knowing what you're in, knowing how things have been, knowing full well there's more coming? What's the mindset towards looking down the road towards the end of the deployment?
Excitement. I can only speak for myself, but I got kind of used to the daily. I was definitely ready to be home. I went on mid-tour leave early in the deployment. Generally, they give you a 2-week block leave where you can go home and get some R&R. Because I was single, there wasn't many single guys there. So I volunteered to go first, meaning it would have the longest amount of time from break to going home. So I think I went in February. So we were there for like 3.5, 4 months. And then I went on block leave and then came back. And then we did the rest of, 8 months or whatever.
Where'd you go for leave?
I came back to Moscow.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was a really difficult thing to adjust. And I turned 21 overseas. I had an O'Doul's and a guard tower that my guys brought me. And I remember going to Mingle's bar in Moscow on mid-tour leave and telling this bartender that I drank there before. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, man, do I get my birthday drink? I just turned 21. He's like,
what?
You son of a bitch. You just turned 21. I've been giving you beer for 2 years. Which is pretty funny. Sorry, John. Yeah, but it was so weird. Like, I remember going to Kuwait And at the time we had ACUs. It was the desert camouflage, but it was a different cut. That was the cut that they went to with the next iteration of uniform. So we looked a little bit different. I was in an enhanced brigade, so we kind of got cooler guy stuff than the full regular army. I remember being down in Kuwait, and there was like 5 of us from my battalion that all went. We all flew together from Mosul down to Kuwait, and we were waiting. And we were just getting our balls broken by the sergeant majors and stuff and senior enlisted guys for being out of uniform. Like, this is our uniform. You can't wear that stuff.
Where do you think we got it?
Yeah, your boots aren't bloused. Where's your like, dude, you guys are in Kuwait. I remember being so angry and just a little shit probably. Like, you guys are down here safe. You have no idea what we've been through. And this is after Tommy, after the Chahal bombing. Like, you guys have no idea what's actually going on up there in the real world. And it was so frustrating.
You got the nerve to give a shit about our uniforms.
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. And we got to, we flew back to Dallas, Fort Worth. And that was really cool because they, like, your plane lands and the fire trucks shoot water over as a salute for all of the Freedom Birds.
So this the end of the, is this the end?
That's just mid-tour leave. Mid-tour. Yeah, they did it both times. But on mid-tour leave, I remember getting the briefing from the NCOICs that handle people coming in and out of country. And like, you can't drink in uniform. But the first thing I wanted to do, like, I was a drinker bad. I wanted a beer. You can't drink in uniform. So I went to the first, after we got out of kind of the terminal where our flights came in and I was going to make my other flight, I just took my top off and put it on, took my blouse off, and was pounding beers before I got on the airplane. Almost didn't get let on my second airplane out of Colorado because some very nice patriots got me good and drunk. But I hadn't been drinking for a couple of months too. And then everybody's like, let me buy you a beer. You're just coming home. Let me buy you. Just great people at the time. And yeah, I almost didn't get let on the flight. And then I got followed by security or the police actually at Spokane International when my buddy picked me up because I wasn't finished with my drink when he got there. And I walked out with the glass, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I was so arrogant at the time. It's embarrassing now. But I remember, like, who are you to tell me?
It's embarrassing, but understandable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Sorry, I went back.
No.
I went backwards.
So this is your
mid-tour leave in February. We had, I think that when I got blown up by that big V-bed was the same time that our Colonel Carilla got shot. And we had this embedded reporter with us at the time named Michael Yan. He's a former Green Beret guy that my platoon actually picked up in Dahuk, which is Kurdistan, northern Iraq, which is controlled by the Kurds, which were friendly to us. It was so weird because we were used to always being full battle rattle, body armor, helmet, weapons, locked and loaded every time we went out somewhere. And then we go into Kurdistan and you go through a checkpoint and then it's like, you're safe. We parked in Dahuk, which is this beautiful city up in northern Iraq. And you could go out on the economy. Like, you could go get in a taxi and you could go to shops and stuff. And it was surreal. It seemed like we were in a soft cap and we had our weapons with us, but no body armor. We traveled in pairs and we could go buy suits and fake Rolexes and all of the things that dumb young army guys spend their money on in a country like that. Cuban cigars and stuff. Anyway, Colonel Carilla got shot and Michael Yan covered that pretty well. It just crazy stories, like Colonel Carilla got shot 3 times, is returning fire into the building. My sergeant major goes in after these guys. His weapon goes black on ammo. He drops his M4, is hand to hand with a bad guy fighting for his life. Michael Yan ends up picking up an M4, trying to shoot these bad guys, squirting, hits a propane tank. Propane tank comes flying out of the building down, like, it's wild stuff. Like, you can't make it up. It's like dumb movie stuff, but
it happened.
It happened.
For real.
Yeah, it happened. Can share the article with you though. It's the horror.
So how was the colonel?
He ended up getting medevaced, and he went on to go lead 2nd Ranger Battalion after that. After we got back, but
full recovery.
Yeah, full recovery. He's the CENTCOM commander now. Yeah, incredible. But it's just like, it's these kinds of guys that are like larger than life people, and that's who I got to serve with. Yeah. Sergeant Major Prosser was shorter than me, but I always said he was like he's probably 5'7", 5'8", maybe he's about my height, but he's as wide at the shoulders too. Just this little freaking pit bull. And the insurgent that he was hand to hand with tried biting him. Like he had ripped his helmet down over his face, and he couldn't, Sergeant Major Prosser couldn't get to his pistol or his knife. And they're like fighting, trying to choke him. When Jan shoots the propane tank, he comes flying out the door. That startled him, and he lost his grip on the guy's throat. So the Iraqi dude bites his wrist, and he wore his watch with the face on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like biting on his wrist, and Sergeant Major's like beating his head against the ground, and finally he yards him out, and that ends it. But there's some pretty cool pictures of Prosser, like all blood covered after he just beat this guy almost to death. Yeah, but like those kinds of men were the ones that I served. That's who I served with.
Mm-hmm.
Like incredible. And there's way more stories from them and the other companies and stuff that had like the same kind of thing.
Well, you're telling these stories about them. They're probably telling stories like that about you.
One of the kind of the next thing, and where my bracelet with the name of First Sergeant Michael J. Bordelon and Sergeant Anthony Davis. Davis was our sniper team sergeant for the company, and First Sergeant Bordelon was our company first sergeant. I think it was towards the end of April 22nd, something like that. The commander's vehicle that they were both riding on got hit with a SV bed, suicide vehicle-borne IED.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just about everybody got messed up, smoke inhalation or burned. First Sergeant Bordelon was burned substantially, like 70% of his body. It was very, very badly burned. He made sure that everyone else was put on a medevac before him. Like he was the last one to leave. Davis, they took him to the cache, and Davis also was like, take care of them. He didn't have any really visible wounds. And I'm pretty sure he ended up passing in the waiting.
His were all internal.
Yep, all internal wounds. And he was just so tough. He wanted all of his brothers to be taken care of first. April 22nd, I think, is his anniversary date. First Sergeant Bordelon fought and lived for a couple more weeks. I think it was May 10th or 12th or something like that. So a couple of weeks after. But just incredible men that...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For telling me that you have difficulty with recall because you've been blown up a few times. Your recall's pretty good.
Yeah, it's just the thoughts aren't really linear. And for a long time I those anniversaries were so important to me because I never wanted to forget the memory of those guys. And it was always such a negative thing. Oftentimes it's just a reason for me to drink, and this is how I'm going to retard and slow down all of these overwhelming feelings. Like it would slow them down enough where they didn't seem so completely overwhelming to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of anniversaries to celebrate and a lot of reasons to try to drown those feelings.
So what you're describing is, it seems fairly common. I mean, now the deaths of those guys obviously affected you. It hurt you. And it seems, right to remember them and right to commemorate that. Did you carry the pain of them with you? Like, there's a lot of, whether it's fire service or police or, combat veterans, they feel that it's wrong to let go of the pain of the things that happen to other people, because if you let go of that pain, you're not honoring the sacrifice of those people. How did you feel about that?
Exactly like that. Yeah. Yeah. That pain was a reminder, and one that I wouldn't miss. I didn't want to miss it.
I talked about this with Chris a bit too, and I'm not completely convinced that the journey is over, but I came to a point where I felt that, and it was comfortable with the idea that healing does not mean there's an absence of pain. And I don't, as I understand, as you progress through the journey of dealing with PTSD, that you should get to that point where, well, it's just a memory now. I'm not triggered by that. It doesn't hurt me to think about it. And I don't know about you, but I'm not there yet. I don't mind carrying that with me because I feel that it's significant, and I don't want it to mean, I still feel like it's going to mean less to me if I let that go. How do you feel?
That's interesting. I have such a different perspective about it now with my faith, just understanding how those things that I let control me, especially negatively, like I'm not going to lose the memory of those guys, but my perspective has shifted on that loss, that it's not a poor me that those guys are gone, but it's a how grateful am I that I got to serve with men like that were willing to do the things that they did and had the courage. And I mean, they're just incredible, absolutely incredible men. And I am honored and so appreciative that I had any amount of time with them. And to be able to keep their memory alive and share their stories is the piece that I can do to help make sure that sacrifice isn't forgotten. And I think we'll probably get into it, but I spent some time working with the Washington State Fallen Heroes Project, which honors those that have lost their lives. And the whole idea is to keep their memory alive in the way that we honor that. So that's always been like, it's still on my mind regularly. But yeah, I see it differently. The pain isn't, luckily the Lord has delivered me from that pain and the hell that I put myself through because of that. But I won't forget them.
Right.
I take them with me differently. Yeah.
That makes sense. I understand that. So we're up to, is this the conclusion of your first tour?
Yeah, the last couple of months weren't, things really slowed down the last couple of months. The first 6 months were crazy. We got through elections and then things started slowing down. I think the way my unit operated, you're a hard target now, and the bad guys didn't want to mess around with it anymore. We had a couple of SEAL teams that came in and were operating in the environment too, that I just think they didn't want to play anymore. They knew our battalion symbol was a Punisher skull with a 2-4 in the front because we were 1-2-4 infantry. And there was like news articles and stuff that said, stay away from these guys, essentially. So that helped.
I can imagine.
Helped a lot. So the last couple of months were really relatively quiet. We did sustain some losses from other companies and within our battalion, but it was relatively smooth.
So how much of a break did you get between deployment 1 and deployment 2?
3 years. When we got back in 2005 from my first deployment, my unit reflagged and went to Germany, and I didn't go with them. I was getting closer to getting out, and I came down on a drill sergeant, not recruiting duty, I think. First, they were going to send me to Korea, and I put in a deck statement to decline. And then my sergeant major told me about an opportunity with the Garrison Command Group that they were looking for. They were trying to hire somebody. It was the only military job that I ever went through that I had to interview for. Mostly, you just get assigned somewhere. But
for recruiting. This is for recruiting.
No, I declined. I did not want to be a recruiter. I would have rather gone back to Iraq than been a recruiter. But I was a driver for the Garrison Commander of Fort Lewis. He was a full bird colonel and aviator. And this is at the time that Fort Lewis and then McChord Air Force Base were going under a joint basing. So they were going to come together as one. So I spent about 11 months as the driver, security, whatever, for the Garrison Commander. And that was such a complete departure. It changed my perspective totally, because I was used to being a line unit, all combat arms, all men, no females at all. Now I'm working for a female commander, like one of the highest ranking people in the entire installation, that controlled all of the civilians. On the line, you say, okay, your range, you have range time. The ammo just shows up. Everything is made. The range is coordinated. You don't have to do anything. Then I get to see this kind of more 30,000 foot view of what it takes to run the installation and all of the different pieces that go into making sure that there's ammo, making sure that the ranges are coordinated. It was cool. And it was nice because I had a Ford Expedition with emergency lights and learned how to like hit the strobes to change the lights. I would always have to do route recons if we'd go meet with like the mayor of Tacoma or something, or go down to Olympia. I'd have to go do a route recon first so that I knew how to get there, how long it took, so that I could maintain the schedule for her, for the commander. And I remember I would use that when I was off base, but like totally not supposed to do that. Use the little strobe change and never waiting at a stoplight. And I pull it onto base through the front gate. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why's your emergency light on?" It's like, "Oh, is it really? Oh, I had no idea. Sorry." I'm lying through my teeth.
So who are we going to apologize to for that one?
Yeah. I'm like, call my boss if you want to.
So this is a complete departure from what you're used to.
Totally. And I came from I didn't have a whole lot of downtime after getting back from deployment. We didn't have the same kind of decompression, demobilization stuff really. Like
Right.
you got block. I remember we landed at Fort Lewis. We went from Kuwait to Fort Lewis, well, McCord, but to Fort Lewis. We turned in our sensitive items, dropped our bags at the barracks, and then went to a ceremony. And then I got in my mom's car and drove back for block leave.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I remember drinking then. So stopping and getting like a case of beer. And we drove from the west side to Moscow. And it was hard sitting in the passenger seat, any kind of pile of trash on the side of the road. I was so hyper vigilant. And I was drinking to try to like keep myself in check and like not be so overwhelmed by that stuff.
Did it feel like it worked, or did it just feel like it was an attempt?
I think it worked. It took the edge off the hypervigilance a little bit. It more probably just released the inhibitions, and I was like, "Well, whatever." I mean,
if it goes, it goes.
Yeah, if it happens, it happens. So we didn't. Yeah, there was really no decompression after that. Just land and go. And then I went into the garrison, and everybody is professional and interaction with the 3-star General Dubig at the time, the First Corps commander. And if I saw my battalion commander in the line, somebody's either getting an award or they're getting in big trouble. And now I'm the commander and the sergeant major are calling me by my first name. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's totally weird.
And then what about interacting with the troops that you probably had a lot of people there that had not been through what you've been through and hadn't dealt with the things that you had to deal with. How did you get along with them? Was there a disconnect there?
A little bit. I was lucky. One of the guys, the operations sergeant that I worked with, Sergeant Presley, was actually in my sister battalion during that deployment. He was a staff sergeant. He was an E6 and I was a sergeant in E5. So we had kind of come from the same place and understood. And then Sergeant Major Willie, he had been there, done that. So they kind of understood. And even the civilians there, most of them were retired out of the military and they got it without having, to some extent. We only had one. Even our secretary, the sergeant major's secretary, was an enlisted gal, and that was like the hardest part for me. Was we're doing PT with females and stuff. That was weird. It's just weird. I mean, you're used to one thing,
sure.
And I'd have conversations with Colonel Murphy all the time about women in combat, and we had big disagreements. She was an aviator, like super intelligent, graduated. She got commissioned in '83 and held patents on pitch and yaw controllers for Hueys. She was super smart. But we talk about women in combat, and at the time, just being young and not as mature as I am now, which I still kind of believe in the argument. But like, ma'am, you don't understand. If I go down, if I get shot, it's going to take 2 guys to pull me off the battlefield, 1 or 2, and then everybody else is going to keep going on the mission. If a woman gets shot, based on our culture, it's going to take more people out of the fight because everybody's going to be so concerned about her. And then there's the practical thing. The Army regulation says that a guy can go without shower hygiene facilities for something ridiculous like 2 weeks or something, where a woman is supposed to only have so long, a much shorter amount of time, 96 hours, something. I can't remember what it is. I might be just making that up. But like, there's all of these kind of practical things. And then culturally, it doesn't make sense. So it was really interesting to be able to have those conversations with somebody that so outranked me. I mean, she was commissioned the year I was born. But it was first name until people were around. And then it was super cool. I mean, it was definitely a cool experience.
Yeah.
But way different than I was used to.
So, and then how long were you at that post? Like, what was... Now leave is over.
Yep. Because leave is over. I left Fort Lewis in May of 2007. So I did that job as the driver for the garrison commander for about 11 months.
Actually, something just occurred to me, if you don't mind me asking. So when you came home from leave, for leave, and there's obviously some, this has had a major effect on you. Did your mom notice this? Like, what did she, what was her take on how you went in versus how you were now?
Oh, she definitely knew that I was changed. Drinking was way worse, and I would have been described as an intense guy, but I had struggled to turn it off. And when you're used to having to put yourself in a place where you're ready to do what you have to do, like it's not just hypervigilant of the situation, which I couldn't have my back, like all the classic PTSD stuff, couldn't have my back to a door, a window. I was up doing like security checks at my house and didn't slept with the gun and all of those things.
So what was your mom's take on all this?
We never really talked about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, this is kind of how it is. And I know that she noticed it and didn't, I don't feel like it didn't get to a point where there had to be a come to Jesus talk.
Gotcha.
I think she just kind of understood this is expected.
Mm-hmm.
Was
she worried about you? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. And I think she didn't understand fully too, because I wasn't honest about how bad I was struggling with her.
Mm-hmm.
After I got back off of active duty, maybe I was still on active duty and I was on leave. I remember that was like my first thought of that I was going to commit suicide. So overwhelmed with these feelings, guilt, the survivor's guilt that I talked about earlier, that was just getting me so much. And I was drunk as usual and sitting on the couch, 1911 in my lap and then in my mouth. And my dog Bailey came up and put his head on my arm and pulled the gun down, and I just sat there and cried. Really? And I wasn't a crier. Like I thought that was a sign of weakness. And growing up, the men that I saw it was TV.
Right.
Like that was, nope, you don't cry or you're a pussy. And it's just kind of how it is. So I broke down crying and that kind of snapped me out of it enough. That didn't end kind of the thoughts of ideation, but yeah, being at a point where you're 3.5 pounds away from a very permanent solution to temporary problems.
And how many occurrences were there of that?
Once like that was that close.
And sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah.
So the dog came, put its snout in like the crook of your arm.
Yeah. And put his head on my arm and it pulled my arm down. And then I put the gun on safe, set it on the couch and cried.
So do you think that had the dog not done that, what do you think would have happened? Don't know? Or
I don't know.
Should we give Bailey some credit?
Yeah, well, I think that Bailey was doing God's work for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good dog.
Yeah.
The way that he was used to snap me out of that moment, I'm forever grateful for.
That's a pretty powerful moment.
Yeah.
I mean, just to see your face and hear you talk about it, and I can imagine that. It's meaningful.
It was. I think that was probably the worst and the closest I got. But there would be a lot of times like I'd be playing around with a gun and always thinking about, well, it would be easier on those people around me if I wasn't here. This pain hurts so bad. I don't know how else to get through it. This is an easy, quick way out. And then I think when you're faced with being in positions where it's life and death so much and you see and experience so much death that you get desensitized to that, which I think is one of the large issues with suicide in the veteran community in particular, is you kind of get used to that loss of life.
Right.
It becomes so normal.
You sort of lose perspective on the value of your life and how that would impact those around you.
And especially if you start with not having a huge value for your own life.
Right.
It's even easier, I think. But yeah. And then I was, when I got back, I was really living so wrong, drinking and chasing women and doing all of the things that you probably shouldn't be doing, or that a lot of guys my age and in that situation do, but probably aren't the healthiest way. Risk-taking behavior. I had a crotch rocket and would ride way too fast. And I actually got handcuffed on the side of the road with my buddy 2 days before I mobilized for my second deployment for doing 160 down I-90 after
160.
Yeah, after losing by a park ranger. It was in an F-150. He said we were evading. I was like, dude, if we were evading, you never would have caught us. That's a funny story too. I had just lost one of my soldiers, died to an accidental death right before we mobilized. And the way that I handled it was like everything else, and went out drinking and blowing off steam. And my buddy, the same guy that I met my father with, we both had 1,000cc crotch rockets and went to Coeur d'Alene. My girlfriend at the time was a bartender and she treated us well. And then we rode back and it was always, don't do anything stupid. Okay. And then he's splitting traffic and I'm on a sidewalk and we're wheeling down, like just
Doing everything stupid.
Everything dumb and stupid. Yeah.
So how? So then you went out on deployment number 2.
Yep.
So mindset going out on deployment number 2 is way different than how you went out on number 1.
Yeah. I think too, I had so much different experience. And what I was most worried about was my guard. I got into the guard and it was a tough transition from active duty to the guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how I viewed the National Guardsmen and the time that I worked with them on active duty. I'm like, these guys don't know what the hell they're doing. They're playing Army. They're not, they don't do it every day. So I got to my unit and some of the guys there had deployed at about the same time that I did, actually. They were operating out of BIOP out of Baghdad and had probably not the same experience that I had, but did have some experience. But we also had a bunch of new guys. And I was worried about how they would respond. And like we were talking offline before about that being stabilized because I had been deployed so recently. When I joined up in the Guard in 2007, they said, you're non-deployable until 2010. You have 3 years of stabilization. And then we come down on mobilization orders in 2008. Like, well, I'm not going to train my guys to go to war and not go with them. That's not happening. So, we ended up training up and then going to, we were at Balad Air Base and ran combat logistic patrols or convoy security for convoys going in and out of Balad Air Base.
Okay.
Yeah, formerly Anaconda, what it was called.
Okay. So you went with them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I was a squad leader and I was a convoy commander, assistant convoy commander, and pathfinder. There's kind of 3 main positions you had to be certified to do. And I think I was the only one in the battalion to have all 3, actually, because most people kind of stuck to one focus.
Get good at something and stick with it.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't, for whatever reason, I got picked to do those things. But in 2008, I think I was like a 26-year-old staff sergeant running convoys, and the way that it operated at that point is it doesn't matter what your rank was. If you're the convoy commander, like that's your convoy. So my platoon leader and platoon sergeant that outranked me could be on the convoy, but
it was your show.
It was mine. Yeah. They're vehicle commanders at that point. Like my name's on the manifest. I'm the one that's operating. So being 26 and having at any given time, like if we did a fuel run from Scania, we would go way south of Baghdad and fill up fuel tankers or pick up fuel tankers. And I'd have 40 fuel tankers and a Bobcat. So like 40, or a bobtail, I'm sorry, not a Bobcat, a truck without a trailer on it in case one broke down. So you got like 42 civilians that you're responsible for, 40 fuel trucks, my own guys, 9 military vehicles and 40, 50 dudes. And $10 million worth of stuff that you're on the hook for. You're signing out from a base.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, a lot of responsibility for a mid-20s staff sergeant. Like, wow. But I think with that experience, when getting home, there's not a lot that spins me up.
Right.
To get, like, what are you getting all crazy for? Nobody's getting blown up or shot at. This is...
Kind of alters it kind of changes your perspective.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You get a way different perspective on how things really are.
So how did the second deployment play out? You've got a lot of responsibility, you got a lot of people, you're kind of in a leadership position now. You're not the new guy anymore.
Yeah. It was great. I was really fortunate. Actually, my company commander, Captain Osmer, he was an E7 before he got commissioned. So he went and kind of green to gold. And then he was a lieutenant and was attached to my battalion for my first deployment. And he got hurt in medevac. So when I got to the unit, he knew my people. Yeah. We didn't know each other directly, but he knew who I was and kind of the unit that I was with, which was super helpful in that. It was way different. The op tempo was so different. The first deployment, we would be blacked out, no headlights on, hauling everywhere, going super fast so we could try to avoid IEDs. The second deployment, the tactics changed and we had MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, and Humvees that we'd look like rolling stadiums with how many lights were on them. And then we would go slow. The fastest we go is like 40 miles an hour. So you go slow. The idea is you're not going so fast that you miss them. You're going slow with lights so that you can spot the IEDs before they detonate. So totally different. We only operated at night. It was so different.
So most of the difficulty you faced was during that first deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the second deployment to me was like a breeze, really. I mean, we got hit. One of the convoys, one of the fuel tankers got hit with an improvised rocket launcher, and that caught fire. And that was like a really, really long mission. We had an IED find, not a detonation, but a find that we stopped and had to call it EOD. But really, it was relatively drama-free for our company.
And how many months was this?
That deployment in country, I think we did like 9.5 or 10. So it was just over 12-month total, but that included MOB and DMOB.
So was there anything else significant that happened during that? Or did you transition home with, it sounded like it was a much smoother deployment than the first.
Yeah, it was much smoother. And in the Guard, we had demobilization time where we went to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, which is where we mobilized from, where we did a little bit of train up. And then when we got back, we had it's like a week and a half or 2 weeks of decompression where we had to stay there and you had to go through all of these checklists. And if you need to see counseling, get that. At that time, I didn't take it seriously because it's the way I viewed it is I'm fine. This was nothing compared to my first one.
Right.
Let me get back to what I want to do, which is drink and chase women, honestly. Like that's what I wanted to do. And you guys are standing in the way of this. So I'm going to tell you exactly what you want to hear so I can get through it.
Yeah.
So for some, that time I truly appreciate and think that it's a good practice to have that time set aside where at least you're decompressing with your buddies without the experience of war. Like you have time where you don't have to be hyper vigilant. Like you can just decompress with your buddies. Like our service members from World War I and II, they're coming over on a boat. They have at least this time to decompress with their buddies.
But did they take advantage of it? That's
yeah.
And it sounds like you didn't. You just wanted to check the box so you could get out of there and get back to carousing.
To living fast. Yeah, living fast for sure.
So is that what happened?
Yeah, that is. It wasn't until once we got back and we were released from active duty, we had a month off, and then our next drill was a yellow ribbon event where they brought in all these readjustment services. And I went through an intake with the vet center, and they said, "Well, they asked a bunch of these screening questions." Excuse me. And I answered the screening questions, and the guy, Mike, looked at it, and he's like, "You're lying to me." He looked at my DD-214 and saw kind of decorations and that stuff. And he's like, "This is BS, what you just wrote on this form that, of course, I imagine you were experiencing these things." And he was able to break through to me. And then when I was honest, that led me to getting into the vet center for counseling, for readjustment counseling in 2009. And then that, I had a great counselor, Adam, who really helped me out. It was the things that I left untreated from the first deployment that had maybe kind of softened a bit, but were still there, kind of got pumped back up after I got back. And then he recommended that I go to the VA, and then that kind of started the process in getting care and medications that didn't really work well. And it was the whole deal.
So what did you do that was most beneficial?
Actually going to talk to somebody.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And the vet center is a place that's pretty unique. It's a vet serving vets. And the majority of the counselors at the vet center are veterans themselves. So they at least have a little bit of an understanding. I think I would have struggled more to talk to, and I have talked to mental health professionals that don't understand the same way. My feeling on that has changed quite a bit, especially after working in mental health at the VA in particular. What I thought is I needed somebody that understood me, when in reality, what you need is somebody who genuinely cares about you more than understanding what you've gone through specifically. There's a big distinction in that.
Absolutely.
Because I know more people that have the experience, but don't care as much, because often they put their experience against yours as a judgment. And I've been guilty of that myself. Hearing people talk about that experience, I'm like, dude, that was nothing. Here's what I've done in my head. And then I'm downgrading their experience, which is not fair at all.
Yeah, because everybody's different. Everybody's had their own journey and their own story, and
their worst day is their worst day.
Right.
Regardless of what happened there. And objectively, if you were to measure them, it doesn't matter how that scorecard comes out. Their worst day was their worst day. Their most traumatic event was their most traumatic event, whether it was getting blown up or shot, or it was something completely, a divorce in the family. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's still the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah. I won't go into my own, but I remember I hear people talk about PTSD. I'm like, oh, yeah, you got PTSD because you had a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. And it took a little while to kind of come around to that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear what you're saying.
And PTSD for me, I really started to understand that it was a natural reaction to unnatural circumstances. That's really it. I mean, you and Chris talked about that, what it's been, battle fatigue, shell shock, soldier's heart, all through the years on the different names that we've called it. And luckily now for this generation, we're starting to actually, I think, give it more credence and understanding the impact that it has and trying to be proactive about addressing it. And it's more common for people to be open about their experience and to share, hey, you're not alone. And this happens to me too. Different things work for different people. So I'm glad. And it takes a stronger, I was always raised that you don't talk about that because that's a sign of weakness.
Yes.
When the strength comes from talking about it, because I don't care what you think of me. I'm going to be man enough to stand up and share how I actually feel with you in hopes that it might help you. Like, that's where we should be with one another anyway, I think.
Vulnerability was considered a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And it does seem like we're starting to come around and recognize that it takes a stronger person to admit that they're hurt, admit that they're sad, admit that they're struggling.
Yeah. I went into, was the suicide intervention officer for my unit for that very reason. Like I think I was pretty well respected within my unit. So I wanted to be the guy that if Sergeant Gaia is having these problems, then Private or Joe Snuffy would be okay. Like, okay, if he's experiencing that, It's okay for me. Like, it's okay.
Right.
So yeah, that was super, super important to me.
Because you're their role models. You're the ones that they want to emanate you.
Yeah.
And they don't want to fall short of that.
Yeah.
And so it creates a healthy relatability.
Yeah.
So then, now you're a chaplain with the sheriff.
Now I am. Yes. Yep. My coming to faith happened in 2018. I had a good friend of mine that I worked with at the VA who invited me to church for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Almost weekly, he invited me, and I made every excuse and told him I would come when I had no intention of coming.
Mm-hmm.
And finally went to a church. It was like 3 minutes from my house, so there was no excuse. I finally went, and I walked in, and the pastor was my age, had a mohawk, and was a former pro boxer. He was like a built guy. And it was such a departure from what I was used to in the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
This guy talked about how many times he'd fallen short, how he needed the grace of God, and what forgiveness has done and what his relationship with God through Jesus had done for him. And it resonated in a way that it never had before. And then these things started happening. At the time, I would have told you they were coincidence, but I understand that it's not coincidence now. It's God's hand in these situations. Like, he just kept knocking louder and louder. Like, how loud do I have to get before you hear me? And a bunch of weird stuff happened. And it was February 12th of 2019 was the time that from my couch, after putting both of my boys down for a nap, which never happened. Maverick was 4 months old or something like that, my youngest. And I put him down and he went to sleep right away, which never happened. And I was struggling. I was having a PTSD episode that day. And I was concerned that with the crying and my oldest not going down either, that I needed quiet. I needed some time to just relax a little bit. And I remember kind of praying out like, God, I need your help. Here, help me, help these boys go to sleep. And it was like, I set Maverick down and he fell right asleep. And Jameson almost took himself to bed. And I sat on my couch and cried. I'm like, all right, Lord, like, here I am. I'm yours. You've shown me enough. I'm ready to open the door. And that I accepted Jesus that day. And then almost immediately my heart started changing, my perspective. And not long after that, I was washing dishes at the sink, and I was thinking about Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't in the same way that it wasn't a guilty way like it was before. I'm washing dishes. And I used to preface it, and I prefaced it with my best friend when I told him at the time, like, I'm not crazy, right? But I'm washing dishes, and I'm said kind of out loud, like, all right, Lord, Tommy's not here and I am. Why? And it was like immediately, not an audible sound, but it was no less real than our conversation I got because I chose you.
Mm.
And I dropped to the ground and started crying. And it was like a minute later, I'm like, all right, pull your stuff together, Gaia. And I wipe my tears off and I put my hands. I'm like, all right, Lord, you chose me. Why? And again, to lead people to me. That's what I got. And I dropped to the ground and started crying again.
Mm-hmm.
After about a minute and a half, I got up and I stopped asking questions because I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to hear it
I don't know if I want to know anymore.
Yeah, that was the first experience I had like that. And that kind of like, okay, a purpose. How grateful am I that a lot of people go through life without understanding their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But now I got it, completely got it.
And at what point did it just sounded like the drinking tapered off?
Yeah. So December 12th of 2021,
Mm-hmm.
I was on my drinking tapered off after Jameson was born in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
It slowed way down. I wasn't drinking for the same reason. I was kind of more in control of my PTSD. I had been on some medications and done a little bit of therapy, which I didn't find particularly effective to be for me. I don't think I allowed myself to be open to the healing at that point. So my drinking kind of tapered off, but in December of 21, I was coming in from the garage and opened my second Coors Light. I wasn't hugging a toilet praying for help. I was just on my second beer. And I went to take a drink, and it's like I heard the Lord said, time to stop. And I stop, like, oh, that's weird. Like, okay, this will be the last one. And I went to take another drink, and I heard now, and I dumped it. And I haven't had a drink, no alcohol since. Yeah. I've had NA beers, which probably has a little tiny bit of alcohol, but I've not had a beer or whiskey, booze, anything since then. And the reason that was so important is it was about 6 months later. That's kind of what led to my real healing. We were down here. It was a Saturday. I was downstairs working on something. The boys were outside playing. The oldest one had a shovel, this little metal shovel, swinging it around, and the youngest one saw it and Jameson hit Maverick in the nose and split the bridge of his nose open.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the screams by the time I got out there. Maverick had his hands covering his face.
Mm-hmm.
And when he pulled his hands off, it's a face cut, so it's bleeding. It looks way worse than it is.
Yep.
But his mouth was open and the blood was going into his mouth and he was gargling it.
Yeah.
So the sound of gargling blood triggered me.
Sure.
I held it together, got him packaged up, stopped the bleeding. We got him all ready to go and went to Sacred Heart Children's Hospital downtown. And I started having super intrusive thoughts. I mean, that's a sketchy place on the South Hill anyway. And it was dark and there's all these people wandering around.
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing faces in windows that weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking I need a drink. These same old feelings came back with a vengeance that I hadn't been triggered like that in quite a few years. And I'm like, I need a drink. Oh, wait, that's not on the menu.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? And I had a really rough night that Saturday. And on Sunday, I was trying to pray through it. And I was realizing what we kind of talked about offline before is that after accepting Christ and understanding that I'm a new creation, like the book says, that the new man doesn't operate as the old man does.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I believe that, which I absolutely do, then I just resigned. This is the last time I'm going to be triggered. This is the last time. It ends now. I called my boss and said, hey, I need to take a week off. And told my buddy who worked there too, here's what's going on. This is what happened. The boys are okay, but this is what it did for me. And he has his own military experience. So he completely understood. And I spent 3 days, I was flat affect. But I spent 3 days in prayer on a chair here in my living room, ripping open all of those old wounds, all of those old memories and reliving them. And I'll tell you, it was almost more difficult than going through them the first time because there was no next mission.
Mm-hmm.
There was no adrenaline. There was no buddies around you. There was nothing. It was
just
me and God.
That. Yeah.
just sitting there. And every one of them, I ripped open memories that I had repressed that I didn't even really recall. And I gave them up. I relived them. It's like, all right, Lord, here you go. Like, I don't want to live with these anymore. And after day 3, it's like those wounds that had been scabbed over for so long were stitched up and healed from it. And that's been 3 years now.
Yeah. It's powerful, man.
Yeah. It's so incredible. Never did I know that my faith, that the thing that was there all of the time that doesn't cost anything, all you have to do is answer the door that he's knocking on, that would be the thing to set me free. And had I have not listened to the prompt to stop drinking, I don't think that I would have been able to get in that position.
Yeah.
That was 3 of the most terrible days of my life. I'm so grateful that I got to experience those from the comfort of my own home with the support of my wife, although she wasn't here when I was kind of doing this work. But
loved it. Don't ever want to do it again.
Yeah, totally. But if I knew that's what it took, or if, going through that as an experience that I can share with somebody else and helping them understand that it was so clear to me after that. Like, oftentimes we try to medicate around it. We try to get over things instead of getting through things.
Sure.
Right. So we try to move away from pain or pressure. We're animals. It's like what a horse does. It moves away from the pressure.
And as a society, I think a lot of the time that we are taught to mask the symptoms as opposed to dealing with the problem.
Yeah, totally.
So,
and it was so incredible. And what it did for my growing faith was it gave me a trust in the Lord that I wouldn't have been able to experience otherwise.
Yeah.
And an understanding that part of my purpose on this earth, and part of the reason I went through all of that stuff, is so that I could get through it and I could be prepared to be able to step into other people's pain, which is kind of going to the chaplaincy thing. The way that chaplain thing worked was completely crazy. The God's hand all over it. A buddy had asked if I ever thought about getting back in uniform as a chaplain. He was a chaplain in the Air Guard. I was like, no, I never even thought about getting back in uniform. When I was done, I was done. My PTSD was bad. Physically, I didn't want to be holding the slot for somebody that could do it better than me. So I chose to get out in 2013. And this was just 6 months ago. He's like, I know a guy. So the guy that he knew was a full bird colonel that was in the chaplain program for the Guard. I talked to him. A couple of days later, met with the wing chaplain out at 141st Air National Guard and the superintendent. We had a conversation. The colonel called me up an hour later. He's like, hey, I heard the interview went well. I didn't know it was an interview. I was like, yeah, well, we had a good talk. I don't know. It's like, hey, I'm not going to mince words. We want you. I hope you want us. Like, yeah, I'll go see a recruiter. So I started going down this path. My mom was at a fundraiser for, I think, fire, some nonprofit. She's at a fundraiser and she was selling beer at this event. And the chaplain from the sheriff's department gave the invocation over the event. She goes up to him because my mom is like the most outgoing, extrovert kind of person. She's like, hey, my son's trying to be a chaplain with the military, wondering if maybe, you might be able to talk. And Chaplain Rob's like, well, do you think he'd want to come work with us? She said, I don't know. She got his card. I called him on a Tuesday. We finally connected. We talked for 45 minutes. He asked me if I would come the next day to their monthly training meeting, which just so happened to be the next day, share my testimony. I said, sure. He sent me an email that night that said, when you get to the front desk, let him know that you're a chaplain candidate. We hadn't even really talked about that.
Right.
Said, you're a chaplain candidate? I thought it was a pretty good sign on Wednesday when I showed up to training and he gave me a crisis and trauma counseling book and put me in a team photo. I did like a 45-minute interview with him that Wednesday. I asked what the next steps were and he said, you have to be voted on an interview with a board. The next board meeting was Tuesday, the following week. So I did an interview with 10 or 12 board members on a panel, shared my story, why I thought I was being called to this. And I'd said to people before out loud, like if I had a magic wand, I'd want to be a chaplain for fire or police. For people that go through these things that I have some experience in, at least with death and the pain of that. I went through the interview. 30 minutes later, Chaplain Rob called. It's like, hey, come in. I want to talk to you about some good news. And as I'm walking into the DEMS building downtown at the sheriff's office, the board members and some of the deputies are coming out like, hey, congratulations. Welcome to the team. And I got a uniform and a badge. And he said, do you want to be on call tonight? I said, no, the next night, give me one more night. So it was 8 days from my first phone call, my first on-call shift.
Wow.
And I've been doing that for about 4 months now. And that's been such an incredible experience, even with had a couple of difficult calls. Child calls are the worst, right?
Mhm.
That's just tough. My first real bad call, I was an almost 2-year-old. And I went into it. It's like middle of the night. It's raining, cold. I went into it with such judgment based on what I could see with my own eyes, but
Mhm.
had this opportunity to step into somebody's pain and love this gal well that just lost her child. And it just helped me understand. My middle name is Joseph. That's where the J comes from. In the story of the Bible, Joseph is like the favored son who gets sold out by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, then thrown in prison. And then after he's released from prison, he gets put in a place to be the second in command of Egypt. That place, he had to be there in order to save his family and his people during a famine. So it just reminded me all of these bad things that have happened to me that I consider bad things,
Mhm.
where peace is building me to put me in a position to be equipped to step into people's pain like that and to love them well and try to be the hands and feet of Christ. And it's been awesome. I have the most incredible team. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office chaplain team is like the most incredible people ever. Truly, I feel like they are just incredible and love so well and genuinely care about people. It's such an honor to get a chance to work with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
TJ, that's a hell of a story.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and share it with me. And I like to think that it's going to reach a lot of ears.
I hope so.
I have no doubt that the things that you experienced and the things that you shared could help somebody.
I hope so.
So is there anything else you'd like to add, or?
Can I just pray us out? Is that okay?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Heavenly Father, Lord, gosh, I thank you. I thank you for just this life and the experience that you've given me, Lord. I thank you for Ty and his desire to sit down with people, to talk to them, to allow them to share their stories, Lord, in hopes that it would help someone else. And that's the selflessness that we should strive for, Father. I pray your blessing over him, his work that he's going to do, his family, as he transitions into this next season, Lord. I pray your wisdom and guidance over him so that that he can help people to get to know them, give them a chance to share their story, Lord. Thank you. I just pray that you are glorified in our time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Well, that's our show for today. And I'd like to thank you for being here. I try to practice a little bit of gratitude every day, and I'm grateful for my team. First, I'd like to thank my guests for allowing me into their homes and for putting up with the mess at my house. Next, I'd like to thank my main man, J-Mac at Studio 42 for his audio prowess. A lot of guys want him to be in their gang because he's pretty good with the bow staff, but I appreciate him editing my material. And next, I'd like to thank Heather at Ravenous Raven Design for my kick-ass website. Have a great day, be excellent to each other, and party on.